Guys, we are back. This is MMA Legacy Show on the Sherdog YouTube page. I'm your host, Keith Shillan. Before I get to this guest, I want to give a little background on him. As I do every single week, I watch the UFC. That wouldn't be possible without this man, as he was one of the founders of the UFC. He's a 9th degree red belt in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. He's the Grandmaster Rorion Gracie. Grandmaster, how are you?
Amazing. How are you, Keith? It's great to be here.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. So let's get right into it. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or you would call it Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Everywhere you look, there's every town in America, there's 1, 2, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools. When you were growing up, your family started the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Did you ever picture it to be this big, where it really has replaced the karate? You don't see as many karate dojos and taekwondo. It's jiu-jitsu. That's what everyone knows is the most effective art, and that's what they want to do. Did you ever picture it to be this big?
Well, when I was growing up, I had no idea, because growing up in a family as big as mine, where everybody practiced this stuff, was an amazing experience. But as I grew older, and after when I moved to the United States in '78, I knew it was going to be big. I had no idea it was going to be this big, because by then there was no internet, there's no such a thing. But I knew it was going to be big, and I knew it was going to shake the martial arts world profoundly, the implementation of that. But again, growing up in Brazil, we had no idea. It was just a whole bunch of little kids, grabbing each other's necks and trying to choke each other as we grew up.
Yeah, and absolutely, it is not only has it affected the communities, it has affected the people. The way police now practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Your own son has set up a program for police departments, Los Angeles Police, New York Police. Military is following the practices of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes.
I'm going to give a little background as some people, this is more of an MMA show, so they might not totally grasp the history and the importance of Jiu-Jitsu, especially to MMA. Jiu-Jitsu came out of judo, and correct me if I'm wrong, your uncle Carlos started it, but it was your dad that really mastered it. He mastered Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Well, Jiu-Jitsu did not come out of judo. It was the other way around. Judo came out of Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, judo. I'm sorry.
For the record.
Out of Japanese Jiu-Jitsu.
Well, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu still came before judo existed.
I'm sorry. Okay, so
Jiu-Jitsu is a combination of judo, aikido, and a whole bunch of other martial arts.
Okay.
So when we came in from Japan to Brazil over 100 years ago, through a Jiu-Jitsu instructor named Mitsui Maeda. Maeda came to Brazil apparently as an aide to the Japanese immigration colony. So back in like 1915 or so, he came to Brazil, the northern area of Brazil, a state called Pará, Belém, in the state of Pará, the city. And then he befriended my grandfather, who was a very influential man at the time. My grandfather helped the guy get settled in northern Brazil. And then to show gratitude, he offered to teach Jiu-Jitsu to my then 13-year-old Uncle Carlos, who was the oldest of 8 children, 5 boys and 3 girls. Uncle Carlos was the oldest one, and my father was the youngest one. So Uncle Carlos trained with Mr. Maeda for a few years, and he started when he was about 13, 14 years old. And then when the family moved from northern Brazil to Rio, he started sharing the knowledge with his brothers, sharing the technique with everyone. So on that note, what he did is that he practiced the techniques shared with his brothers and so forth. And then eventually they started teaching Jiu-Jitsu and fighting and stuff like that. My father, who was 11 years younger, had a very frail health. He would run up a flight of stairs and have fainting spells, and nobody knew exactly why. So the doctors at the time recommended he be kept away from any kind of physical activity, which included Jiu-Jitsu. So he used to watch his brothers practice day in and day out, but just kind of hanging out around the academy, little kid. Until one day, when he was 16 years old, a student showed up for a class, and my uncles are not around to teach the class. So my father offered to teach the man a lesson. The guy said, "Okay, kid, let's play." He stepped on the mat and taught the guy a class. By the time they got done, Uncle Carlos shows up, very apologetic. "I'm so sorry I'm late. Let's have the class now." And the guy said, "No, Carlos, I had a class with your little brother, Elio, and I liked it. In fact, I would like to be his student from now on." So my father was promoted to be a teacher by his own student.
Yeah.
What
Wow.
happens is my father soon realized is that the techniques he had memorized by watching his brothers practice require a certain amount of physical ability and strength and speed, which he did not have. So to trial and error, he started modifying those traditional Japanese techniques that everybody was practicing at the time and adapting to his own needs so that he could become proficient in spite of that, not as strong of a body he had. On that note, that modification gave you more emphasis to natural body movements, better timing, better leverage, and so forth. That's what kind of gave birth to what we now call Gracie or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
So the old man's input was not the one that invented anything. He just made it easier for himself because he was needed to find a way to become proficient. In order to test his improvements, he started then challenging everybody. And those challenge matches what eventually led him to be a major icon in Brazilian sports history.
Absolutely.
So the guy, like, nationally recognized and stuff like that, he became a major guy. So that was the beginning of the Jiu-Jitsu introduction to the Gracie family.
Yeah.
Of course, eventually my uncle Carlos went on to have 21 kids. My dad had 9 kids. And between that and the grandchildren, it just went on and on and on. And we're the largest family of athletes in history. Today, there's over 50 people in the Gracie family practicing Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, so that's absolutely incredible. I've read a lot of the history. I've watched a lot of the documentaries. It's incredible. One documentary they called it an army. They said the Gracie army, and they had a picture of all of them, all the generations. The older guys in the front, the bigger, the 20, 30-year-old men, little kids, sitting there, so a lot of people have this misconception of MMA, as they called it in Brazil, Vale Tudo. They had this misconception that this started 1993 UFC 1, but your dad was fighting in these fights well before that, and it wasn't a lot of people when they think it was a small at the little local hall, a couple hundred people. No, I was reading stories. 60,000 people were in attendance when he was fighting.
Yeah, when my father fought Masahiko Kimura, the Japanese champion, which was not an MMA fight, was a Jiu-Jitsu match.
Jiu-Jitsu, yeah.
Yeah, he fought in Maracanã Stadium at the time, 180,000 people fitted on the stadium. They took one of the goalposts out and filled up half of the stadium. So there was a lot of people watching that. And even before that, back in the 20s and 30s, when the guys were fighting, full stadiums of football and soccer and stuff like that, filled up with people checking that out. So there was a lot of popularity and a lot of viewership for those matches. Some of them with the Jiu-Jitsu matches, some of them were no-holds-barred matches.
No-holds-barred, yeah. So your dad was like a true sports icon. Like he was one of the most popular he was up there with soccer players in Brazil, right?
Yeah, for sure, yes. He was huge. I mean, the guy was just absolutely incredible. He had the popularity that few people had in Brazil those days.
Now, I know you're his oldest son. Are you old enough to remember any of his fights?
I know I only saw my father fight one time when I was 15 years old, and he was 55 already. He had done a television interview in a Brazilian, TV in São Paulo, and during the interview, the guy had a whole bunch of different martial artists participating in like a panel kind of thing. And my father, of course, is 55 years old. He's very strongly promoting Jiu-Jitsu. That's what he did all his life and so forth. He's talking that Jiu-Jitsu, as always, he said, was the most effective form of martial art there is. And then a 28-year-old, about 180, 190 pounds strong young guy shows up, a Capoeira expert. Capoeira is the spinning kicks that they do in Brazil. Yeah. And that guy said, well, I don't think Jiu-Jitsu is the best. I think Capoeira is much better than Jiu-Jitsu. And start mouthing off with the old man. And my father said, okay, well, if you want, we can do a test of this anytime you want. I'll bring one of my nephews or sons and stuff like that, and you'll do that. And the guy said, absolutely not, old man. I only fight if it's with you. So immediately, right there, the old man got his blood pumping. He got excited and starting a scuffle with the guy. But the TV interviewer, the guy who was handling the show, said, absolutely, let's not do this right now. And he put the whole thing on hold. And they scheduled to do an actual fight the following week to, of course, increase viewership.
Absolutely,
so they pumped the whole thing up. It was just crazy. Oh, my gosh, it's going to happen. And that following week, that's going to be. So the whole Brazil is waiting to see that fight, right? And anyway, so my father goes back there the following week, and he's wearing his kimono. They put the mat on on the TV station. They put mats down, cameras, everything else, filming the stuff. The guy shows up with his Speedo-like shorts and shoes. That's what the capoeira outfit was. And they square off, and the fight happens. My father just stands in the middle of the mat. The guy does some spinning kicks and this and that, and he does a spinning back kick. And when he gets close enough to be able to reach the first do of a spinning kick to kind of measure the distance, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And then when the guy, was too far. So when the guy gets close enough to be able to reach the old man, my father rushes the guy up, grabs a hold of him, takes him to the ground, ends up mounted on the guy. Yeah. So now the guy is struggling. He punched the guy in the face. The guy turns around, and he actually hurt his finger. I think he kind of cracked a finger, something like that, on the guy's face. And then when the guy turns around, he brings the hand around the guy's neck, grabs his own collar, and chokes the guy out. Now you see the camera right on the guy's face being choked. It's very funny. So it took about a minute and a half.
And he's 55 years old.
And he chokes the guy out on live on TV, national TV, and that kind of thing. It was like sensational stuff. So I was there to watch that when I was 15 years old. It's the only chance I saw him fight live. But I know he fought amazing fights. I have documentaries. A lot of fights he did. It was great.
Imagine if he was 25, what he would have done to that guy.
He would have waited another week, man. He would not wait.
So I'm fascinated about you, guy. Like, as you say, you don't want to credit him with founding Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, but he definitely is the guy that people say mastered it. And he's the one who, and that's his trickle down to all the family members. And then besides the family members, now to family members, students, and then students, and all these generations later, he's still the guy that you walk in a jiu-jitsu studio, you'll still see his face. On many, many studios, you'll still see his face. And this might not be anybody who's ever met him. It's 3, 4, 5 students down until him, and they still have the respect for him. I heard a story that he trained jiu-jitsu right to basically his death, that he was 70 years old, 80 years old, and he'd still be rolling with other guys in the family. Is that true?
It's not true.
Okay. Because you hear that stories, right?
He was 70. He was rolling when he was 90.
90!
Here's the deal. Let me tell you a story. Yes, that's true. He had his ranch in Brazil with the ring, little mats in there. Every person who walked in, I don't care who he was, he would ask, do you have your gi? The guy would say, no. Well, I have one for you. And you drag the guy to the back and spar with everybody. That's one thing. Now, the last time I saw my father, he was 94 and a half. That was 6 months before he passed away. 6 months. I went to visit him on his ranch in Brazil. At 94 and a half, I would get in there. He gives me a kiss and said, Rorion, let's go on the mat. I want to show you a new choke I'm working on. And he kicked my butt at 94 and a half. 94. Which for me is an amazing, I have the video of that, by the way. It was an amazing experience, wonderful way for me to kind of be with the old man the last time. 6 months later, he passed away.
Yeah.
And I didn't go to his funeral. I didn't think it was necessary. I want to end up on a high note, sparring with the old man versus seeing a lifeless body on a coffin. Yeah. You know what I mean? And knowing him, as I knew very well, I know he would prefer that. I mean, there's no reason for me to go there and be mourning his death. What I did instead is that we threw a huge party for him at the Academy in Torrance, and we had a blast inviting everybody, telling stories about the old man having fun, which is exactly how I grew up to understand the way it should be, which is I hope I'm going to have when I pass away. I don't want anybody crying around. And I want people telling jokes about, spending every time together, the good times we had. That's the way it should be, end up on a positive note, like people do in the Orient,
And it seemed like with him having that moment with you, your last moment together, that's beyond just jiu-jitsu. That was his way of bonding with his son, right?
Yeah, I was always very close with the old man. All my life has been dedicated to pay homage and respect to him. Everything I've done, the way I behave, the way I treat people, the way I handle myself, the way I teach jiu-jitsu, it's everything as close as I can to pay homage to the guy that I thought was, my hero, of course.
Absolutely.
And we're very close. And I did not need to go say goodbye to him after he passed away. I said everything I wanted to say to the old man while he was alive, which I thought was the best thing in the world, So yes, we are very close, and all their life, always consulting him through the whole time. Say, Dad, what do you think of this and that? And even when he's getting older, when people sometimes tend to be forgotten by their children and stuff like that, and say, well, say once in a while hi to your dad. I'm always checking, Dad, what do you think of this and that? Keeping him, excited about that, about my projects here in America, which he came to visit many times, had a blast, always enjoyed. Oh my God, this is great. And then, it was just for me a way to be connected with him the whole time. So everything.
Yeah.
The book made for him. Did you ever have a chance? Did you get your book?
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're gonna talk about that for sure.
Great. So the old man was like, it was for him 100%. So it was very cool.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So you can read stories about him. You can watch documentaries, and they always talk about him as the martial artist, the teacher, the very strict, very tough on his students. He kept people accountable. But talk about just him as a man, as a dad. Like, how was he every day away from the mats?
Oh, he was an amazing guy. Okay. I mean, I can't say enough about the old man. He was very strict on his ways out of dedication for his students. He tells me when he was very young and he used to start teaching, when he started teaching in the beginning, before he got older, he would show a technique to the student, right? And his way of teaching involved him. Every time you come to class, he show you, let's say, 3 moves. The next class you go, he reviewed those 3 moves and add 3 new ones. In the next class you go, he reviewed the 6 moves and add 3 new ones. So he's always repeating everything that you have seen prior, because that repetition conditions your reflexes so that it becomes faster and faster. He's not teaching you with a lot of theory so that you memorize what he's saying. He teaches you so that you execute the move. And by executing the move over and over and over and over, eventually he puts the hands on you, you just do it without thinking.
Yeah, second.
That's the objective. You follow me? So if you're driving a car and a kid crosses the street after a ball, you have to think which one is the brake. You're going to hit the kid. But because you've done it so many times, you step on the brake without thinking.
That's right.
This is the kind of feedback that he was working with to get his students to respond. So in the beginning, he was teaching classes, and the student who knew the technique right, he'd get angry and just complain with the student. Lack of experience in his 20s and 30s. But then as he understood, he said, wait a minute, student is not doing wrong because he wants to be stupid or doesn't know. He's not doing it right because I'm not doing it right. His theory is there's no such a thing as a bad student. There are good teachers and there are bad teachers. But the student is the student. He's there to learn. Yeah. It's up to the instructor to figure out a way to make the student fall in love with it, appreciate it, and get the results he needs. So he kind of changed his way of acting. He became very dedicated. So he would not stand walking by a classroom with 40, 50 people on the mat sparring, and you look across the mat and see somebody grabbing the collar wrong. He said, wait, that guy on the back over there, change the grip, my son. It's not like this, it's like that. He would not let anything go by because of his dedication to the student. It was all out of passion for the student. His respect was tremendous. The reason the Gracies always stood up and challenged everybody in Brazil, him and his brothers and so forth, especially in the beginning, was because they want to prove to everybody else. They want to earn the respect of the student. Say, listen, I'm willing to fight anybody so that if you want to learn, if you want to have your child learn jiu-jitsu, let him learn from me because I'm willing to die for you. I'll fight that big guy. I don't care who he is. I'll fight anybody. That was the reason that was the flame that pushed the Gracies to do the challenge as we always did. Yeah. It's not because we were arrogant or boastful. I want to kick everybody's ass. That was never the intention. It's, of course, misinterpreted by a lot of people. People think that the Gracies are very arrogant. The Gracies are this. That's not it. We are just passionate and very respectful of our students. When we're willing to challenge everybody like they did the generations before mine, it's just to show the world that we have the very, very best of martial art, which is jiu-jitsu, and we're here to do whatever you want. What do I have to do, Keith, so that if you're going to put your little child to learn jiu-jitsu, let me do it for the kid, man. I'll do the best for him than anybody else. Yeah. That was the passion, you know what I'm saying? But understandably, that can be misunderstood by a lot of people. They are arrogance and this and that. Therefore, I grew up with him telling me, Rorion, half of the population loves the Gracies and understand the Gracies. The other half are jealous and hate the Gracies. Yeah. So there was always that kind of thing, and I'm accustomed to that. I'm used to this. But I know where I stand, and I know what the Gracie vision stands.
Yeah. So let me explain to any of the listeners who might not understand when you talk about the Gracie challenge. It's a very famous It's basically how UFC came along, but also just it was a tradition in your family. You guys had a style, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Not only were you passionate about it, but you wanted to prove that it's the best in the world, and you were open. Like, oh yeah, oh you think Taekwondo is better? Well, come over and fight us and find out. Or if you think boxing is better, I know your father challenged Joe Louis, the legendary boxer, and smartly Joe Louis turned him down. Very smart of him. But so what happened was, and many times guys who didn't know any better, the karate guy or the taekwondo guy or whatever, would say, "Oh, that little skinny guy, I'll knock him out. I'll kick him in the face." And what would happen was you guys would have fights in your dojos, sometimes on the street, sometimes on the beach, anywhere, basically anytime, anywhere, and you guys would take them down and either choke them out or they would quit or whatever possible, and you would show the dominance of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Let me ask you this. And this was not just your father. Obviously, your father was one of them. I know you have countless stories of you doing it, your brothers, your cousins, the uncles, everybody. Did anybody ever lose? Did you ever have a Gracie challenge where the karate guy or somebody else won?
Not that I can think of. Carlos, my cousin, my father, of course, lost to Kimura, lost to Waldemar Santana back in the days. After 3 hours and 40 minutes, the old man was exhausted, got kicked, and kind of slowed down the process. So Uncle Carlos threw a towel for finishing the match. Same thing with Kimura. So that was my dad.
But Kimura outweighed your dad by like 80 pounds.
Yes.
And he was what? Judo guy.
Jiu-Jitsu guy as well.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jiu-Jitsu.
And was like 33, 10 years younger than my dad, at the time as well. And then heavyweight champion at the time. So my father knew 100% he couldn't fight Kimura. But when Kimura came to Brazil, my dad challenged Kimura, knowing that he could not beat Kimura. It was impossible.
And
so
what happened in that, sorry to interrupt you, but just to give some context, what happened in that, Kimura put on the move that's called today the Kimura on your dad, and your dad was such a badass, he refused to tap out and got his arm broke.
No, the arm never broke.
Oh, I thought he did break his arm.
No.
Oh.
No. Yeah. What happened? I'm glad we're talking about this, man. Clearly up the air.
Because that's the story.
He never had a broken arm from Kimura. Uncle Carlos threw in a towel and stopped the match. When he saw my father's arm twisting so much, my father could see his hand here on his ear. But he was already numbed out and so crushed by Kimura that he was beyond feeling pain. But again, Uncle Carlos, who was his cornerman at the time, seeing the angle of the arm was being turned, threw in a towel and forfeit the match, giving Kimura a well-deserved victory. That was the deal. But prior to that, when Kimura landed in Brazil, my father challenged Kimura. Kimura declined the challenge, saying that the weight difference was so big that he didn't want to fight my father. Said, if you want to fight someone, fight Kato, the number 2 in the world, who can beat you just as easily as I can, said Kimura. So my father accepted the idea of fighting Kato as a qualifying round to fight Kimura. So during training with one of his training partners, a week before the fight, the guy grabs my father by the belt and yanks on it and breaks my father's rib. So he fights Kimura with a broken rib. He had to sign a waiver taking responsibility for the fight. He fights Kimura, and on the first fight, Kimura threw him a lot of times. But the fight ends up in a draw. And my father said, Carlos, to his brother and manager, if I fight this guy with a good rib, I'm going to beat him. So a month later, my father fights Kato again. This time, he chokes him out in 6 minutes. And the fight is available on a DVD that I have called Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Action, available on Amazon. So that and many other fights. So Gracie Jiu-Jitsu actually shows the actual fight. So my father fights Kato, and when the second time they fight, he chokes him out in 6 minutes. And at that point, Kimura climbs on the ring. You see that on the video. Kimura climbs on the ring, and that's when he accepts the challenge of my father. So now he's going to fight Kimura, the heavyweight champion of the world, fighting my father. It was the first time ever a Jiu-Jitsu championship of the world was to be fought for the title. Outside of Japan is my father fighting Masahiko Kimura at Maracanã Stadium, the largest soccer stadium in the world at the time. It said 180,000 people. That's the one I told you about. They took one of the goalposts out, filled up half of the stadium. Wait. Kimura was so confident of victory that he declared in the papers prior to the fight, if my dad could resist him for 3 minutes, due to the huge weight disparity, he should be considered the winner of the match. So the fight goes on, and my father tells it right in the beginning, he felt that he was thrown inside of a blender because he didn't know what side was up. Kimura was just literally playing with him like a cat playing with a mouse, throwing him all over the place, just kind of manhandling him. But he couldn't submit the old man. He was slipping away the whole time. And then there was a moment during that fight in which Kimura has his legs, one of his favorite moves. He had his legs crossed across my father's chest with his crotch right here, Kimura, right? And the legs crossed across my father's chest like a bandolero belt across his chest. And he's squeezing my father's chest with his thighs so strongly that my father, he had promised, by the way, Uncle Carlos said, Hélio, I only let you fight Kimura if you promise me that if he catches you in a good technique, you're going to tap out. I don't try to be a hero in there, and then he rips the arm off your socket. Now you lose, and you're going to be hurt for the rest of your life. My father said, no, yeah, Carlos, I promise you, if he gets him in a good move, I want to tap out. But I want to know what this guy can do, because I can't believe he's got anything going that I don't know. So the old man went in like a suicidal mission, saying, I know I'm going to lose, I just want to know how. You know, that's why he didn't have a student representing him. That's why he wanted to do it himself.
He wanted to learn.
So during the fight, like I said, Kimura catches my father on this move, in which he has one leg here and the other leg on his back, and he's squeezing his chest with the leg like a vice across his chest. If the legs were across his neck, you know, scissoring across the neck, it would be a choke. But that's not the case. It was across his chest. And the legs, Kimura's legs were so strong that my father could not inhale.
Ugh.
He couldn't get air into his lungs, right? So the guy's squeezing. Done it before to 1,000 people. He know it works. And he's squeezing that in one hand, pulling the collar of my father's neck. And my father now, he tells me afterwards, I was thinking, I promised Carlos that if Kimura had me in a good technique, I was going to tap out. But this is not a good technique. It's just a sheer strength move. That means that I don't have to tap out. Because I think in his mind, he said, well, after the fight, if I tap for this one, people are going to say, well, how did he get you? What technique?
Yeah.
My father couldn't live with the idea, well, he just squeezed me and I tapped out.
He's just stronger.
Like fighting someone pulls your hair and you say, I give up. You know, rip the hair off for crying out loud. You know what I'm saying? So that's what he was thinking, I think. So the guy started squeezing, and because he couldn't inhale, while he was deciding if he should tap out or not, he lost consciousness. My father passed out. When you pass out as a result of something like that, you pass out with your eyes open. Kimura, after a while, not getting the result he wanted of my father tapping out, thought, man, this guy's not going to tap out. Not knowing he was unconscious, let go of the legs, went on top of him and mounted on my dad. Now, my father's already laying down with the eyes open, unconscious. So when Kimura let go, the circulation came back. The old man regained his conscience, and he said when he woke up, Kimura was sitting on top of him, drying the sweat of his brow, saying, good, very good, complimenting him without knowing the old man had passed out. I mean, it's the most bizarre stuff I've heard in my life, you know? So anyways, the fight continued on, and eventually, a few moments later, he finally catches my father on the Kimura arm lock, named after him. And that's when, after having my father's arm twisted back, Uncle Carlos, seeing that moment, threw in a towel, forfeited the match. But that was the 3rd minute of the 2nd round. In other words, the old man outlasted the 3 minutes Kimura promised for another 10 minutes. So it was into the 2nd round.
Where did who started the rumor that it was, or the lie that he broke his arm? That's you read it everywhere.
I think Kimura wrote a book thinking that. Now, here's the deal. Kimura was so impressed with my father's performance during the fight that the next day he went to the Gracie Academy to invite the old man to teach in Japan, claiming that the techniques my father presented during the fight were so refined they didn't have them in Japan. So losing to Kimura was the highlight of my father's career as a jiu-jitsu man. Even though it was a loss, he always saw it that way. The only thing he regrets, my father regrets, and one of my biggest regrets in my life, was not having had the opportunity to tell Kimura that during the fight, when he put that squeeze on my chest, I went out. And he actually was fighting for a few seconds with a guy who was completely unconscious. Yeah. I wish I could have told that to Kimura, that he tells me that. Anyways.
So,
by the way, before I forget, that story and many other stories are at GracieMuseum.com.
Yeah.
So the audience, if you guys want to check out a whole bunch of new stories, please check it out. And if you have virtual reality glasses, you can go in there with the virtual reality because it's an amazing experience. If you have not checked it out, you should do it, please.
Yeah, you
GracieDiet.com.
sent it to me. It's absolutely incredible. What? How much did your dad weigh at this time?
His average weight was about 140 pounds,
Yeah,
143
he was a very
pounds.
small guy, and
Very
Kimura's
small.
like 200 something pounds.
Yeah, Kimura, yeah.
So
210, something like that.
another rivalry you had with Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was Lucha Livre. There was another pack of Brazilian with another style of fighting, Lucha Livre. Were you ever involved in that? Because you always hear the stories about the
Yeah,
dojo.
I was in Brazil already, but I guess there was a fight that one of my cousins went to a Luta Livre guy school, and then they got some kind of misunderstanding, and the guy got sucker punched him, and then he went back, called some other brothers, and then they kind of choked everybody out, in the school. And then there was kind of riffraff happening between those guys, and eventually those guys went to the academy, looked for some challenge match. Rickson worked out with one of the guys, and I guess they defeated the guy, and then they did it again on the beach, a fight that is also in the Gracie in Action videos, again available on Amazon. And then this kind of stuff happened like this. And then eventually they had a fight in a stadium where they had 3 Luta Livre guys fighting against Jiu-Jitsu guys, and then, fight was there. All those matches are on the in action tape.
Yeah,
So it was.
It's such a big rivalry that we in America really don't grasp it, because the country was divided, like who was on which side. And when they had that event, the event with the 3, like I know Murilo Bustamante was part of that one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fabio Gugel, Murilo Bustamante, yeah.
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 It's an incredible thing that I'm really fascinated with it. There was also, it seemed like, and I saw this documentary, and it talked about they would become rivalries in the family a little bit. And one they said was your father, he was the champion of the family until he, as you mentioned, he gets to a certain age, he has to pass the torch on. Seemed like he passed it on to his nephew, your cousin Carlson.
Yes.
In the 50s and 60s, Carlson was the champion of the family. But
Right.
then he started his own school, and there was a little bit. Is it true that a rivalry kind of happened between them, or?
Well, what happens is you have a very strong army with a whole bunch of people. And as people move out, naturally, there's competition going on. Yes. You know what I'm saying? So the way of looking at things, Carlson likes to, the great fighter, amazing representative of the family, trained a whole bunch of champions. And, I had the highest respect for me is, I always consider Uncle Carlos kids my brothers as well. And then Carlson is no exception. Always, much older than I was, and just kind of grew up with those guys around. Mm-hmm. And he eventually grew up. And then where there's competitions, his students would compete against the academy and stuff like that. I think it was a natural consequence. And then, of course, there's other instructors of the academy that kind of broke away, did their own thing, and that thing kept growing. Yes. So it was overall, I think it was a rivalry in the sense that helped to sharpen everybody's swords, if you know what I mean. I was living in America most of that time already, so I've been here for most of that. For more time in America than I've been in Brazil.
Was it simply an athletic rivalry, or was it personal?
Well, in family, when the stuff gets like this, sometimes you get a different point of view. People want to do certain things, and there's a disagreement here and there, which happens in every family. There was a side of it that was a little more on the blood side of it too, which just keeps it a little more spicy,
Another rivalry we heard, and this one seemed a lot more athletic than personal, but it has to do with you. You hear the stories about you and your cousin Hollis, that you guys had like the most legendary matches against each other. How true is that?
No, that's not the main. What happened? Hollis is my older brother. I always saw that. He spent more time living with me than with anybody else in the Gracie family. Before I was born, my father took on and raised Hollis, who was Uncle Carlos' kid. So he was raised by my dad. So when I came around, Hollis was already there. I always looked up to him as an older brother. The guy was extremely competitive, great fighter, courageous guy, charismatic guy, an amazing guy. And he's the one that inspired me to come to the United States for the first time. Mm-hmm. He had come to visit his mother, who lived in New York, and he described the airplane taking off with so much, he described so vividly. How do you have to try this today? And I had to try it. So the idea of the airplane taking off, I said, I got to experience that. And then he came back from the United States. He opened up a bag with a whole bunch of stuff smelling like the American smell, the plastic stuff and everything else. Yeah. And I kind of do that. But yeah, we had a lot of matches, Hollis and I. We had some fights as well. He always kept me on my toes. He was a little bit ahead of me, always. He's just a
But he
step
was older
ahead.
than you.
Yeah? Say what?
He was older than you.
He was older, a year older than me, yes. And he was always a step ahead, not only because his personality was more aggressive than mine. I don't know at what point he had a little more concern about trying to win. I never was worried about that. But he, like I said, he was a really good guy. We're very close together. If we go somewhere and there's only one towel, I would use half of the towel. He would use half of the towel. It was like that close, him and I.
Yeah.
And always relied on me for everything he needed. It was very serious. He was that. And like I said, he was a little more aggressive personality-wise than I was, you know. And his mindset was, I got to do this, I got to win. And I always was more focused in being a teacher than it was in being a competitor.
Yeah.
You know, I know that, and he knew that too as well. So his goal was to be the fighter who does that, which I thought was great. He had the personality and the competitiveness and the attitude for that. And mine was to be a teacher. And I consider myself the best teacher in the family.
Yeah. He became like the family champion during like the 70s, right?
He did, yes.
And then so tell me where is my line wrong? So it was Helio to Carlson. Was it Carlson to him?
Carlson to him, yes.
And then him to Hickson?
And him to Hickson, yes.
Okay. And then so, you know, to where we are modern day with, you know, some say, and again, I'm just getting this opinion from documentaries, that he was the best ever.
Hollis was the best ever?
Holes, yeah. Is that true, or is that fair to say? Or
it's tricky. I don't know if that's fair to say. No. I think Hollis was an amazing guy. He had amazing personality, characters, and good jiu-jitsu talents and skills. Was very dedicated, always tried to learn more stuff. But I don't know if it was necessarily the best ever. I think the best ever was the old man.
Plus, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's what my opinion was, based on what I saw and what I read and stuff like that. And Hollis was an amazing guy, you know, and Carlson was an exceptional guy too as well. In fact, Carlson, you asking who lost, Carlson had one loss with a guy in the northern Brazil called Euclides. I think that was the only loss he had. Other than that, he had several matches, most of them victories, and a couple of draws and stuff like that. And fought Valdemar Santana 5 times. And then I think he won 3 fights and had 2 draws or something like that. And then, of course, Rickson is an exceptional guy, jiu-jitsu guy. Has another group of talent, of skills that is just tough to match. I mean, Hollis was very good. And then Rickson came in also and just was an incredible fighter. Again, those guys, I'm saying if you put in blocks of period, there was my father, and then Carlson came in, and Hollis would be the next one. And then Rickson was the next champion of the family, which is just an exceptional guy as well.
Yeah.
So
now
to say that Hollis was the best ever is tricky. I don't know if I can say that. No.
It's subjective.
Yes.
Yeah.
Subjective.
So when you came to America, what I love about the story is you come to America out in the California area. Your plan of growing Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is you had the challenge matches. Either people would come to where you're fighting, or I've heard you tell stories where you've gone to other people's gyms, beat up their instructor in front of them, and then their students start learning from you. You said you've done hundreds and hundreds of these challenge matches, but you've never actually had a sanctioned MMA fight.
No, only time I fought in one of the few times I fought in the ring. Actually, I feel in Brazil I had one of those fights. There's a documentary. Gracie in Action had one of those as well. Same fight that Hollis and Helson, all those guys are fighting on the same event. Again, available in the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Action DVD. Let me just remind you that when I came to America, the plan was not to do that. When I first came to America in 1969, I was only 17 years old. I came to spend a month vacation here. And then I came to California, and my idea was to spend a month. So in order to save money, I stayed at the YMCA in Hollywood. And while staying at the YMCA in Hollywood, for security reasons, I decided to leave my cash. I didn't want to leave my cash and my return ticket in my room. So I asked the receptionist at the Y to keep the money on their safe, which the guy did, put the money on the safe. A week later, when I went to get to some more pocket change to spend my daily expenses, I find out that the receptionist had stolen my ticket and my cash, gone. All right. So I called the manager. He said, I'm very sorry. I'm going to give you a couple of bucks to buy a sandwich, but I'm not buying a new ticket to Brazil. Call the airline company, which I did. And the airline company back in 1969 tells me that, listen, we're not going to give you a new ticket. We're going to have to wait for 6 months to make sure nobody used your ticket so we can give you a new one. So in order to not freak out my father in Brazil, I called the old man and said, Dad, guess what? I love America. I'm having a great time. And I'm going to be here for at least another 6 months.
Yeah.
He said, everything is okay. I said, everything is great. Oh, good time. Have fun. Click.
Yeah.
I had no money. I didn't speak English. I didn't have a ticket. I didn't know anybody. Just so happens that at the Y, I had met a judo instructor whom I sparred with, and the guy became friends of mine. And he got me a job in a place called White Castle to make the little mini burgers.
Yeah.
So I started working at White Castle, and in White Castle, I made some friends, and eventually I left the YMCA, moved into some friend's house, stayed there with them, and then went to Hawaii, and then the trip that was going to be a month-long trip stretched out to be a year-long trip. I saw Jimi Hendrix in concert a couple of times, had a great time, made some good friends, and it was a very maturing experience for me, Keith, to be here by myself in another country without knowing anybody, without money, without speaking the language, find myself literally panhandling on a street corner for a few days, sleeping in a newspaper on the sidewalk. But all that made me grow a lot and give me a lot of confidence and strength. So after 1 year, I went back to Brazil. The old man freaked out that I went through all that without telling him. Said, it's okay, Dad, all bad things happen for a good reason. But by that time, I was already hooked in the United States. So I spent 2 years saving money to come back, which I did in 72. Spent 3 months here visiting some friends. Went back to Brazil, went to law school in Brazil, graduated law school. And after finishing law school, that's when I decided to come back after realizing in the previous trips there was nobody doing the jiu-jitsu similar to what we did. So I came back in 1978, first stayed with some friends that I met on the first trip. And the mother of this friend of mine was an actress. So she would go to work in the studios and I would be home alone. While staying at home, instead of staying watching TV all day, I'm washing the windows, I'm cutting the grass, I'm cleaning the bathrooms, cooking dinner, anything to do so I can show appreciation to her. Eventually I started looking for work and she goes, Rorion, what do you want to do? I said, anything. Do you want to clean people's homes? I said, of course. So she'll be calling her friends, everybody in the movie business. Rorion does great cleaning work. Oh, send him over here, over here, over here. And I'm cleaning everybody's house, right? Until one day I landed in the house of a woman whose husband was the assistant director on the TV show Starsky and Hutch. 40 years ago, the lady sees me. Hey, you're a good looking guy. How come you're not in the movie business? I said, that's right. How come I'm not in the movie business? She said, why don't you take some pictures? I have to take it to a casting office. I said, great. I took some pictures, hung up my cleaning broom, and I started doing extra work on shows like Fantasy Island and Hill Street Blues and Heart to Heart and Quincy and Simon and all the shows during this, 80s. At the same time, I left the woman's house, put some mats in my garage, and every person I met anywhere, I invited for a free class. I'm an amazing teacher. The guy gets hooked immediately, if not soon, after having a class with me. So he gets hooked in the class. I say, hey, bring a friend, I'll get you another free class. Bring 10 friends, I'll get you 10 free classes. And people start bringing their friends for free class all over the place and loving it and talking about this whole thing. And it didn't take long until some of these students would say, oh, my former karate instructor is upset that I'm no longer training karate with him or kung fu or taekwondo or whatever. He thinks that much better than jiu-jitsu. He wants to challenge you to a fight. Would you accept that? I said, of course, bring him in. So the guys would bring their former martial arts instructor to the garage. And of course, I'll tell my students, hey guys, Thursday night, 7:30, a karate guy's coming up. So the students will pile up in the garage because they want to see a real fight. And because jiu-jitsu is indeed the most effective form of martial art, it's not my fault. Somebody had to be number one. I just happened to be it. And as we say in Brazil, in a blind man's land, he who has one eye is king. So nobody knew anything about jiu-jitsu at the time. So the guys would come to fight me, and I had the means of, in a very humane, very loving way, would embrace the opponents, put them on the ground, mount on top of the guy. They would struggle a little bit, couldn't get out, get exhausted in 30 seconds, and say, I give up. I say, no problem. I want to do it again. And we do it again and again and again. Eventually, the guys would say, you know what? This is cool. Can I learn? I said, sure. Sign up. And the guys, most of the people that came to try to beat me up, walked out of there, friends of mine, students of mine. So little by little, that's how the West was won. After 10 years in my garage, where I got to a point where I was teaching 630 classes out of my garage. These are 630 private half-an-hour classes, $10 a pop out of my garage. $10, half-an-hour class, right? Only one-on-one. I show the student the move, and he practices on me. So I'm the one that takes the beating, which nobody else does that, by the way. So, anyways, after 10 years of doing that and hundreds of challenge matches, lost the count. I said, this stuff is not going to end. And I had 87 people in a waiting list. I remember that, including movie director John Milius, who did Conan the Barbarian, the Lon Schwarzenegger's career. John Milius eventually invited me to be the creative director for the UFC. So John Milius now calling me every 2 weeks. When can I start? I said, John, I don't have time for you. Eventually, I said, you know what? It's not going to end. So I opened up a school. Challenge matches kept happening. More of those fights on the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Action DVDs, 1 and 2. So after, like I said, many challenge matches, I said, this stuff is not going to end. So that's when, in '93, I had the idea of creating the UFC, brought Art Davie, who was a student of mine, brought John Milius in, who was a student of mine, and we came up with the concept of the UFC. And then I wanted the world to see, because the challenge match we had in the academy and the garage first, the students will pile up like bringing friends. It was packed, you know. And after one of those matches, the guys are saying, "Gosh, the whole world needs to see this." I said, "Yeah, we got to show this to the whole world. There's not enough space to fit this stuff in here." So my friend Art Davie said, "Oh, we have to go television." I said, "Art, let's go television. What the heck are you thinking?" Of course. So we start calling everybody, and eventually called Bob Marowitz, the guy who owns Semaphore Entertainment, flew to New York, showed him a clip of some videos. He flipped out, and they said, "We want to do this." And they said, "If you make the show happen, we'll put it on pay-per-view." So I brought a whole bunch of my students in one night. We put together a business plan, presented it to everybody, and that night, we raised the money to make the first UFC. I volunteered Royce. People say, "Oh, guys, put Hitler." I said, I chose Royce specifically because I felt that Royce would be a better example of what Jiu-Jitsu can do. Royce dressed in white like a little angel. People say, "Oh my God, I'm feeling sorry for that kid. Get him out of there," like a little dove in the middle of a whole bunch of sharks. Royce goes in there and cleans everybody's clock like there's no tomorrow. Does an amazing work. Skinny little Royce, boom. It wakes everybody up. The world of martial arts will never be the same. And from that point on, after the first event, the U.S. Army calls me up. "Mr. Gracie, we saw the little guy beat the big guy. We need to learn this." Asked me to create a program for them, which I did. And now he's on. It's,
yeah.
You know, the program
like we talked in the beginning. Yeah.
Military, FBI, security, everybody does this
stuff. Your son does stuff with the police.
Yeah, we created a program that now they're carrying on, but it started with me back in the day again, like everything else. Interesting and very positive ride. So as exciting as it can be. It's going to be a movie already. It hasn't been released yet, but it's fascinating. By the same company who did Michael Jordan's Last Dance. So soon enough. How are you doing on time? Are you?
Oh yeah, I'm good. So I want to ask you. So you said you chose Royce because he was a better representation, and we're talking about UFC 1. We're talking about the very big one. This is the one when. Well, actually, let me pause on that for a second.
Not better representation. Royce, yeah. I don't think he was a better representation. I think that to show the little guys.
The little guy, yeah, that's what I meant. Like, because if Rickson won, so this is the story you always have. If Rickson won, he looks the part. I mean, Rickson's ripped. He's bigger. I mean, especially back in 1993, he looks like his stereotype. If you're doing a video game and you're downloading a fighter, Rickson looks like it. So people wouldn't understand that it was Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. They'd just go, it was Rickson. Look at the guy.
Yes.
You know, he was I mean, look at Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock was really ripped up back then. Rickson was a Brazilian version of Ken Shamrock. Royce, obviously, much skinnier. But Art Davie tells a different story. In his book, Art Davie says that the plan was always Rickson, and then you guys had a falling out, you and Rickson.
No, it's not that we plan was always Rickson. Art thought that Rickson would be it, but the plan was not always Rickson. Now, Rickson had, decided to do his own thing, which I thought, he left the academy. And I'm the one that said, no, Royce is going to be it. He came back and said, well, this is my fight. I said, no, this one is Royce's, because Royce has stuck to me through thick and thin. And I think Royce is going to show the world that the little guy can do. Now, if you want, maybe in the future I can put you, because I'm the promoter, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
That was the deal on that. Now, Art's mind he always thought that Rickson was it, because as a guy who's creating the show also with me, he's thinking, wow, Rickson's going to look great. But I never wanted Rickson. I always felt that Royce was a better choice, and I think I was right, because he gave this small guy hope. There's much more people like Royce around the world than people like Rickson. They can identify with that guy.
Yeah.
So from the marketing point of view, that's what I want to do from the very beginning.
So one question I wanted to ask you about Rickson is, you know, we've seen him fight. He fought in Pride. He fought, you know, this documentary of Choked and all this, and he was the at that time he was the champion in the family. We saw how good Royce was, but the one knock, and I'm not, please don't take this as an insult on the family, but the one knock about Rickson was, well, he never fought the best guys at the time. He didn't fight Randy Couture. He didn't fight Fedor Emelianenko. He didn't fight the Nogueira brothers. He didn't fight those guys. How good was Rickson? Do you think he would have beat those guys?
Yes, Rickson as good as he possibly can be. There's no doubt in my mind that Rickson is it. And, you know, I think Rickson is, yeah. He didn't fight those guys for whatever reason. It's not because he didn't want to fight those guys. I think because whoever was organizing his events didn't have the opportunity or the presentation or the way to arrange it. It's up to the promoters to make it happen. But I have no doubt that Rickson is as good as he gets.
The one fight in MMA that never got made, that was promoted, that it was going to be made so much, was Sakuraba and him. Because, you know, Sakuraba beat a couple of his, you know, he beat Royce. He beat Hoyler. I mean, Hoyler's much smaller, but he beat Hoyler, and he beat Henzo and
Hyen.
And Hyen, yeah, Hyen.
And he lost to Halek, my son. So let's just make sure we know that.
Yeah, but I'm talking about this time when they were trying to make Rickson.
Yes, I remember that. Too bad it didn't happen. I would put my money on Rickson any day.
And that, why didn't Rickson continue in MMA? Why did he decide that he was done?
Well, nobody better than him. Yeah. What am I going to say? What am I to say? Why did he stop? I mean, he stopped because it was the right time for him, I guess.
Sure. Now, you obviously you couldn't fight in the UFC. You were the promoter. That would have been a conflict of interest. But did you ever think about? God,
I said I was going to do a good question. People say, well, how come you didn't fight in the UFC? I told my brother, I said, listen, if I have to do everything I do, produce the show, find the thing, raise the money, do everything, think of plan, everything else, and fight, I want all you guys back to Brazil. I don't want to see anybody around you.
Yeah.
Give me a break. I've got the head to do and doing everything else. Plus, I have to go there and fight. No, beyond that. I'm already in my late 40s at that time as well. So I think it was like 48 or whatever.
Plus, if you won, it would have looked. People would have called it fake. Oh,
no, you couldn't fight in UFC. You can't do it. You don't have the head to fight if you're doing everything behind the scenes like I was doing. There's no such a thing. Plus that, imagine if I win. Yeah. Then it'll be a fake show. It's not.
Oh, he's the promoter. Of course he won. You know, people would have thought it was fixed.
No, and I wouldn't think about fighting UFC. There's too many talented guys out there who can do the job, you know, as good, if not better than me, who can, you know, do the job. I was very happy that I was in the position to do what I did and had the vision and the condition and the authority and the understanding of doing what I did the way I did it. Don't regret it one bit. I think it was the perfect thing to do. And having Royce to do that, icing on the cake, was perfect.
Tell me if this is a fair statement, because this is one thing that Art Davie was really kind of stressing in his book, was that he had the vision of a promotion and he didn't care who won. He didn't care if the Gracies won. If somebody else won, that was fine. He would have promoted that person. If Ken Shamrock won, or if sumo wrestler won, or whoever, he didn't care. It was going to be win-win no matter what for him. But you weren't looking at it as a promotion. You were looking at it as a chance to promote Gracie Jiu-Jitsu on a grand scale, now on TV.
No, what I did, well, of course, I want to do a real fight. This is why I want to bring fighters from all different styles. But I've always believed that Jiu-Jitsu is the best. I mean, I believe on my horse and my Royce.
Yeah.
So I put Royce in there as a representative. And of course, there's a connection with him.
That's your brother.
But my brother, I love and I want him to do well. But Royce could have been knocked out by any one of those guys.
Absolutely.
So that is a fair fight, a fair deal. We didn't know who's going to fight who. We draw the names out of the hat the night before. So only the night before is that they find out who's going to fight who. Any one of those guys could throw a punch and finish Royce out. So he has 100% all the credit for doing a great job inside the octagon. Now, Art, for him, it doesn't matter because he doesn't have no attachment, no emotional attachment to that. He was my partner. And from the business point of view, I would have promoted and paid whoever won. Well, of course, I'm happy that Royce won. And I deeply down, I believe that Jiu-Jitsu has the elements to do it. So much so that today, people talk about MMA, But Jiu-Jitsu is the spine of MMA. If you take the Jiu-Jitsu moves out of MMA, it collapses. It doesn't exist. So MMA people are now doing guard passing, are doing this move, that move, choke. Everything is based on Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
You can call it whatever you want. But it was a way for me to make the world aware of the importance of the ground fighting aspect. It's not just the wrestling moves, because wrestlers go in there with just wrestling, they get their butt kicked. They can be very strong athletes, but if they don't know the submission moves, it doesn't work. So now you have submission wrestling, which is nothing more than wrestling using the Jiu-Jitsu technique, which is a smart way to do it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, my dream was to share this stuff with the world.
Absolutely.
And I was very successful in doing that.
So there's a lot to unwrap. One thing I want to ask you, you said that, Royce was the pick for UFC 1. He came back UFC 2, defended his title. Did you guys ever think about changing it and putting a different family member in for number 2?
No, because Royce needed to come back and defend the title.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Royce was it. He's on a roll. And then at that point, Rickson was starting to fight in Japan. So he kind of went to Japan and became very successful there. So he's running Japan and Royce is in the United States. I mean, what else do you want?
Tell me, do you think this statement, you talked about now that Jiu-Jitsu being the spine of MMA and it's all blending of styles, but, if you don't have Jiu-Jitsu, you're not going to be successful in MMA. We both agree on that.
Yes.
Before it was about the art, the style, and now it's more about the athlete. Do you agree with that? Because the athlete 100%. Is cross-trained. Everybody, I mean, even the guys who aren't known for their jiu-jitsu skills still compete in jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
You take a guy like
100%.
I think about a guy like Israel Adesanya. He's one of the best fighters in the world. He's not known for his jiu-jitsu, but he still probably spends 20 hours a week doing jiu-jitsu. If
he's smart, he should. And the more he does it, the better for him, because you need the ground fighting knowledge.
Yeah.
How can you go down there and you don't know a certain basic moves? You have to know that.
Sure.
Knowing the triangle is going to do more for you than if you don't know. Knowing a guillotine choke, so those moves you enhance everyone. And that's exactly, Keith, that was my message. The world needs to know this. Because remember, when I first came here in the 70s or early 80s, people are doing punches and kicks all day. If you go in there as a karate guy today, you're going to be slaughtered. Do you know what I'm saying? If you're just a kicker or a puncher, you have no chance. Because the fights are going to get to a clinch and eventually they're going to end up on the ground. That's why the wrestlers always did so well in school fights and stuff like that, because they grapple and take the guy to the ground. They are accustomed, they're comfortable in that environment. So Jiu-Jitsu is an evolved way to do it, it's a refined way to do it, because to the grappling aspect, you add the element of submitting your opponent. It only makes sense. So I'm on a crusade to educate the masses to a good thing. And again, I'm very proud and happy with what I did.
Yeah. And obviously, you'd be proud. Not only did Gracie Jiu-Jitsu explode, obviously the whole sport of MMA, all these different, and there was, I know people argue there was MMA before the UFC and all that, but, well, I mean, they say with the Shuto and all that, and Pancrase and all this, but not to this effect. It obviously.
Wait, let's be real. Come on.
No.
What I did create UFC, nothing would exist. Give me a break.
Yeah. And did you, I know Art always, his goal was always this. Like, did you ever expect MMA, like UFC, to be as big as it is today?
I knew I was going to rock the world. I was 100%. Yeah. No doubt in my mind. I knew that in 78 when I came to America for good. I said, I'm going to change the world. I remember telling the students in my garage that. How do you used to tell us you're going to change the world? You're right. I said, I know. And now it sounds, looking in hindsight, I said, of course I would. Because I knew I had something so unique that anybody who is into the whole fighting thing, eventually the plan, like Royce did, is to challenge in the boxing champ. My father challenged Joe Louis, like you said.
Yeah.
Challenge the world champion. But eventually they're going to say, well, that's not for me. Punching is great, but if you get into a clinch, you get the world's best boxer in the world now. If he's on the beach and you jump on top of him, he's in trouble. If he's laying on the sun on the beach, you know what I'm saying? He got to lay on the sun on an empty beach. Whereas if he's a crowded beach and somebody jumps on top of the guy, he is in trouble. That's because he can't punch effectively. He's laying down. So knowing the kind of fighting I was bringing to the scene, which is the fighting that I saw my family do before me, very effectively, very realistically, I knew that we're going to rock the martial arts world upside down. I knew that 100%. So yes, I was expecting that to happen. But I did not know that eventually UFC, the internet would exist.
Yeah,
of course. I didn't know that stuff was going to explode that way, which exploded my expectations way beyond I thought. But I knew it was going to dent and cause an impact. I knew that 100%. Never had a doubt. Not for one day.
And I think even like the early days of MMA, you had Brazilians were at first dominating, Americans kind of caught up,
Yeah.
but no, I don't think anybody envisioned that it would be so popular in Europe, and then now there's fighters in Australia and fighters in Africa and all these countries. When you guys did the blind draw and Royce got the Boxer Art Jimmerson, could that have been a better matchup? Because not only is obviously that's such a good stylistic matchup of guy without the ground game, but also when you come to America, the combat sport in America at the time was boxing. Like that was number one. Mike Tyson was at the top of his game in around 1993, and Evander Holyfield and these guys. Like when I was a young kid, the first UFC I ever saw was UFC 6. But if you rewind 2 years earlier, if you asked me at that time who's the best fighter in the world, I don't know who's the best fighter in the 93, but I would have said Roy Jones Jr. or Mike Tyson or like that.
Yes.
Could it have been a better pick to get the boxer right away?
The luck of the draw, I guess, as you call it, and Art Jimmerson, we picked the top guys for we called all the big guys first. And eventually, everybody said no, 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 no. Eventually, Art Jimmerson said yes. So he was ranked 10th in the world, whatever that means. And then came in and did what he did. And Royce, it was good pick for Royce because, not like you said, it was boxing against grappling, which is a question people had for a long time. Muhammad Ali had fought Inoki in Japan. Remember the jokish fight they had over there? So there was that kind of thing already in the air. And then not only that, answer that question, but also Art Jimmerson comes in there with one glove in his hand. It's like, I'm going to, jab with one and knock him out with the other one. So the whole thing was like a circus atmosphere.
Yeah.
But it was a magical circus. What happened exactly the way it should, Yeah. And then you had that huge guy, the sumo wrestler against the Gerard Gordeau. They take that kick on the face in the very first fight. The tooth flies over the commentator's table. I mean, what is this? It's like a really crazy gladiator mindset, and that's what we needed at the time. That's what rocked the whole thing upside down.
Yeah, I remember the commentator saying, like, I just get hit by a tooth. Do you still talk with Art? Do you still talk with Bob Morrow?
Yes, I call Art once in a while to say hi, and we're he's doing his thing right now, whatever that is, and I do my thing. But yeah, I like Art. He's a good guy. It's the kind of person I needed when I landed here. Remember, I'm from Brazil, barely know how to speak English, want to do this crazy dream of mine. And Art is a very smart, very smooth, likes to
salesman.
A salesman. This is the kind of perfect combination. We hit the stars lined up for us at that point. So we did something really good together, and I had great and fond memories of that. And I like Art as a person, yeah.
How about Bob Morrow? Do you still have a relationship with him?
Bob Morrow is the same thing. Uncle Bob, I call him. He's a great guy, visionary also, and then the guy who had the means of executing an important part of our dream, which is to share that stuff on pay-per-view to the whole world. I have a good relationship with everybody.
Last one. What about Campbell McLaren? I know he helped you guys in the beginning.
Yeah, Campbell McLaren is the guy from Semaphore who first said, yes, I liked it. He was the director of programming. He's the one that bought into the idea. In fact, I have a videotape. I keep a lot of documents so that you know. I keep everything. I have two things I have. One is a videotape of the meeting that I had with all my students to raise money for the first UFC. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've read that.
Campbell McLaren flew in from New York to talk about what the pay-per-view was about. Art is in there telling everybody what the show is about, and I'm in there just kind of, making things happen and bringing everybody together. So the students are sitting there and hearing from the very first time about what the UFC was going to be about. We described it as the video game Mortal Kombat for real.
Yeah.
At the time it was a Mortal Kombat game. So that's how we described everybody. And on that night, we raised the money for the first UFC. On that meeting.
And you still have these videos?
I have it. I have the videos, and I have the business plan that I hand to everybody else. I have everything kept, man. I'm it. I have it. Check out GracieMuseum.com to get blown away.
Yeah. My last question about the UFC. We talked, I know Campbell helped out too, but the three guys that usually get credited most with creating the UFC is yourself, Art, and Bob. Art's in the UFC Hall of Fame. Bob's in the UFC Hall of Fame. When are you getting in?
You know what? I'm in my own Hall of Fame.
I mean, do you even care? Do you care? Or
I don't care. I don't care at all. I know what I did, man. My history tells for.
But I mean, that call's got to come soon, though, right?
Well, if they think it's great, but it makes no difference for me to be there or not be there. It would be great. They recognize that more for them because it's like you said, Meyerowitz got his part, Art got his part. There's a tooth missing on that mouth.
Yeah, that's right.
If they bring me in, great. If they don't, it's their problem. It's not mine. I know exactly what I stand. And when I sold the UFC, people say, oh my gosh, you sold the UFC. I don't regret it at all because Meyerowitz at that time, who bought my part, came to me one day after UFC 4 when Royce fought Dan Severn.
Yeah.
Until then, we had a 2-hour window for pay-per-view transmission. I don't know if you know that story or not. We had 2 hours for pay-per-view transmission. And shows 1, 2, and 3, even though there was no time limits, 2 guys walk in, 1 guy walks out, shows 1, 2, and 3 lasted exactly 2 hours. In other words, when the show ended, the time of the satellite transmission ended, the perfect time. On UFC 4, the 2 hours expired, and with the fight, Royce and Severn was still going on. It lasted for 2 hours and 3 minutes. So everybody who paid for to see the show, they did not see live event of the fight going on. It was the biggest mishap in pay-per-view history.
Yeah,
was that fight. Only the people at the arena saw it. So what happens is that we had to play the show again for free. We have to kind of give credit to people, refund money. It was a big mess, huge mess. However, the popularity that interruption brought about, the money couldn't buy it. It was everybody was talking about it. Did you see the show last night? I didn't see the end of it. It was like people going crazy. World Cup, the last game, 10 minutes before the game, you interrupt. It's like a revolution.
Yeah.
Popularity was so crazy. I had people calling me up and say, Rorion, you are a marketing genius. You probably did it on purpose. That's how wild the thing was.
Had the cliffhanger. Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, 100%. So because of that fight, Meyerowitz comes to me and says, Rorion, listen, my partner, I love the guy. Say, Rorion, we can't let that happen again. We have to put time limits on the fights. So you can plan the show to fit within the satellite transmission. And of course, I understand that. From the production point of view, for them, was a production program about a fight. For me, however, was a real fight being televised. Yeah. I didn't want time limits. I wanted interruptions or anything. So I said, Bob, if you put time limits, you're going to kill the show.
Yeah.
What do you mean I'm going to kill the show? I said, listen, the only reason you can put a little guy fighting a big guy is so that the little guy can do the skill move, defend himself, tire out the big guy, so that when he gets tired, you win the fight. But he needs time for that.
That's right.
If you put time limits, when the big guy gets tired, if the bell rings, he rests, you can't put a little guy against a big guy anymore.
Yeah.
Now you're going to put people in the same weight class. By putting people in the same weight class, what happens is if nobody wins, you need judges to determine who threw a better kick, who threw a better punch. And sometimes the judge's interpretation is not the real deal.
Yeah.
It becomes very subjective to the judge's interpretation, not what happened inside the ring. I come from the fighting world. That's what I've done all my life. So the last problem is, I told Bob, that if you get someone on a perfect chokehold, you can render him unconscious in 6 seconds. 6.
Yeah.
If the bell rings at the 3rd second, you have to let go. And the guy who was going to sleep in 3 more seconds is going to be gone, out. He now recovers, goes to the corners, drinks some water, comes back, and sometimes wins the fight.
That's right.
So it's no longer a real fight. You understand?
It became a sport.
It did not. It became a sport. It became an entertainment sport. The biggest one in the world, must say that. Doing a great job. Dana and the boys and the Fatih took it to a whole different level. But it's still a sport.
Yeah.
Because for me, Rorion, the whole idea was to compare actual fighting styles. I could not accept that. I couldn't sleep with that. I cannot face my father and say, Dad, listen, we're going to put time limits. It's going to be a little different game, but I'm going to make a lot of money. I don't want to, I couldn't say face the old, I couldn't be prosecuting myself that way. For me, it's way beyond the money.
Sure.
Way beyond the money. Not to mention the fact that I think I have benefited more than anybody else on UFC.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm light years ahead. I'm on a different trip. I am forever the father of that baby. So I sold my interest on the UFC, and I don't regret it to this day. Oh my gosh, no, forget that. I moved on. For me, it's a question of principle. There was the UFC while Rorion was around, and then there was the other UFCs at the time. That's a different story.
It's completely different. Yeah. And one thing to your point, I wanted to point out is we have problems in judging MMA right now where they
I
don't
know.
understand all the aspects. But it would have been even worse back then. We think people don't understand jiu-jitsu now. Imagine back then. And a
Yes.
perfect example, speaking of UFC 4, I always remember it's one of my favorite moments. Jeff Blatnick, who became a very good ambassador of the sport. To his credit, he
Yes.
really learned the sport over the years. But when he
Dana
first came
Zucker.
in, he was an Olympic gold medalist from wrestling. Dan Severn was on top of Royce Gracie. I know you're smiling. I know you know exactly what he's going to say. Royce is throwing up a triangle, and his exact words was, "He's not in trouble or anything. Nothing to worry about here," because he didn't understand a triangle.
Yes.
And like
Yes.
3 seconds later, Dan was choking out. Was tapping out because he was getting choked. And nobody before. Now you obviously understand a triangle. Your father understands. All the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people, but nobody else knew anything about it. And I remember sitting there.
Yeah.
So, like I said, the first one I ever watched was
It-
UFC 6. I went back. I was a little kid. I went back and watched the other ones. But I remember watching it, and I was like, a guy choked a guy with just his legs. Like, what the hell?
Right. And Jim Brown said, fighting is not what he thought it was.
That's right.
Never, ever underestimate the guy for being on the bottom. It changed the game.
It did.
Now.
It complete.
Yeah.
Do you have any relationship with Dana and those guys?
I went to see the UFC a few times. They were kind enough to give me tickets once in a while. But I love those guys. I think I have a good relationship with every one of them. Yeah. The Fatih has now sold it. I'm no longer involved in that. I've always had a good relationship with them. And then Dana White also always treated me very gratefully, very respectfully. And I have the guy high respect for him, especially because he took the UFC once I sold to Marovitz, and then Marovitz sold it to them. Dana and the Fatihas took the UFC to a whole different level. I mean, they made a really, really impressive show, and I root for them to keep making the thing grow more and more, because the bigger the UFC grows, the more remembered I will be.
That's right. That's right. A couple of questions, and we've already gone way over time. I appreciate that. Let's talk about what you're doing now. You're doing tons of stuff. Tell the people, like, obviously you have you're still active in the jiu-jitsu community, but I know you're doing some other things. Tell us what else you're doing.
Okay, so here's the deal. Next week, starting this Monday, I am launching Gracie Week, which is 100% online and 100% free. So if you can then put on the show notes in there, gracieweek.com for people to check that out. A whole bunch of stories from the old days and a whole bunch of stuff that I think they'll enjoy very much. I highly recommend that. That's Gracie Week. That's one thing. The other thing I'm doing, of course, and I recommend everybody to check out, is the Gracie Diet. That's the secret of the success of the Gracie family. More than anything else, is you are what you eat. So Uncle Carlos, understanding the importance relation between good performance and good health, he was not a doctor, but he spent 65 years studying food combining. So anybody out there, whoever have a stomach ache or a heartburn or a headache, get rid of that stuff. Give yourself a shot. Get the book Gracie Diet on Amazon. Try that for a couple of weeks and say goodbye to medicines and pills and all that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend that. Check it out, please. You're going to love it.
And all the listeners, you go down to the show notes. All these things will be in the show notes. You click on that. You can show you right where you can order the Gracie Diet. Grandmaster was gracious enough to send me a copy, which is hopefully I'll drop some pounds listening to the Grandmaster's advice.
And the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu book, right? Everybody who does Jiu-Jitsu should have one of these, because this book here is the original course developed by my father in terms of self-defense and everything else. So that's the essence of Jiu-Jitsu right here, the Bible of Jiu-Jitsu, as we call it. So check that out. It's also available on Amazon, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
I was saying to my wife, as a package, I did not expect this package. It was absolutely extremely generous. I said to my wife, so I do Jiu-Jitsu myself. I said, how incredible is this that the Grandmaster, the number one guy, is sending me the book created by his father who mastered Jiu-Jitsu. I said, and I'm a student. Even though I am officially not under him, my instructor was under a guy who was under a guy who was under Machado, who was under a guy who was under Helio. So it all goes back to Helio, anyways. So
yeah, it's all family, man. You're part of the family, no matter which way you cut it.
No matter. It's crazy as it sounds. You go play football. The guy who founded football did not send you a book, or the guy you play basketball. I said that's pretty cool that I'm a student of him, even though because of the line. It's pretty cool. I told my wife, I said that was a cool moment.
Good, thank you very much. One rule though, if we ever get together, you can't use the techniques of the book on me.
Oh, and like I would even have a chance to, because even at, I believe you're 69 years old, you would still whoop me, and you wouldn't even break a sweat. As any Gracie, I have never had the pleasure, or I don't know if the pleasure would be the right word, but I've never rolled with any Gracie family member. Pleasure probably wouldn't be the word. I think it would be a cool moment, but I don't know if my bones in my throat would agree with it. But
But you know what happens, especially the Gracies, you're going to find an experience, a very positive experience.
yeah,
Because those guys know what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? And it should be something it should be a fun thing. If you ever come to California, let me know. Go back here on the mat and play a little bit. Like I said, as long as you promise to let go of my neck when I tap
yeah,
out. So it
yeah.
should be fun.
Like I never have a chance. Anyways, guys, he was so gracious. We went way over time. Make sure you check out. I'm gonna have all the things in the show notes. Make sure to check out the I'm gonna put the Gracie Week, the Gracie Diet. I'm gonna put his dad's book where you can get that, and also I'm gonna put in
Gracie Museum.
the museum. So I checked it out. I was playing around there. It's really, really cool. Grandmaster, you're obviously a legend. Thank you so much for what you've done, your whole family has done, and what the Gracie family has continued to do and will do in the next generation and the next generation.
Thank you very much, Keith. It was a pleasure of mine. I appreciate that. Continued success for you. And hello, and thank you very much. All the best to all your followers, okay?
Thank you.